Mark Waring, the animation director on Isle of Dogs, introduces himself and the film. Before shooting began, he and Wes Anderson traded ideas about mood, tone, and what the stop frame technique should express on screen. Peter and the Wolf, a handcrafted short by Susie Templeton that blends animals and humans, anchors many of those early conversations. Its influence shapes the animation's look, the puppets, and the overall style the team develops. A dog barks a warning about snout fever, and a voice asks everyone to keep following. Waring returns to his earliest talks with Anderson about the dogs themselves, debating whether they would move and behave like real animals that happen to speak or lean toward a cartoon posture on two legs, closer to Fantastic Mr. Fox. Anthropomorphic stylization loses out early, and the dogs settle into a middle ground, dog-like in body but human in speech. On screen, a new arrival names himself Spots, pledges protection and service, and settles the matter with a simple line. He is now his master's dog. The production wrestles early with how dogs and humans would move together. The team develops ideas of pace and motion through testing and brings in real dogs to film for reference, giving animators material to build performances on. Overseeing that reference work falls to Waring, who matches the results to what Anderson wants from each performance. Nutmeg warns against drinking something nearby. It carries toxic chemicals, she says, and cites a relative whose tongue turned black from it. A single unimpressed syllable answers her. Different animation styles serve different characters, Waring explains. The dogs themselves are foam, armature, and real fur, built with a lip sync system that lets animators open their mouths, widen their eyes, or pull them into snarls. A chorus of snarling erupts on screen. Human characters use a separate replacement face system instead, born from Anderson's brief for a handmade, crafted look. Painstaking hand sculpting produces every face deliberately in a rough, poppy style rather than a smooth one, and the seams between expressions stay visible on purpose, sketching through sculpture, in Waring's phrase. Shouting in Japanese rises from the set, and someone off camera wishes aloud that they could understand the language. Waring insists the language barrier changes little in practice. Stop frame requires the same process everywhere. A voice track is recorded ahead of time, broken into phonetic sounds on X sheets, a drawn map of speech where hello splits into individual mouth shapes across frames. English or Japanese, the mechanics never change. Chasing literal translation matters less to Waring than capturing expression and intent. Japanese speakers embedded in the production help the animators judge whether a line lands forcefully or gently, and how its intonation moves, a guide the animators lean on even without understanding the words themselves. A charge of unfairness to the dog comes from Miranda Nelson, a reporter on screen. Distinct emotional voices from the cast bleed into the animation almost on their own. Two brothers reunite after years apart. One asks if he was ever the runt of the litter, and the answer comes back flat, not anymore. Listening to Bill Murray for weeks or months on a single shot leaves its mark, Waring recalls. A mascot's washed-up bravado, his lost spirit, his admitted gloom, all filtering into the dog's animated bearing. Personality maps the route for performance, whether the animators intended or not. A curious dog wonders where all the rumors come from. The answer lands simply. Everybody talks, and dogs listen. Character, Waring adds, seeps through on its own. Paul Harrod introduces himself, the production designer on Isle of Dogs. Sets built for camera movement often carry multiple scales of puppet at once, large ones up front and smaller ones staged farther back. Forced perspective grows tricky the instant the camera itself starts moving, since motion tends to expose the scale trick. Spots calls that plainly obvious. Watanabe's lab counts almost like a character in its own right, Harrod says, thanks to its comic clutter of moving arms and tubes carrying liquid, a challenge to stage frame by frame. Most films build locations. This one builds individual shots, since Anderson wants a specific composition in each frame, even when that set serves no other shot in the sequence. The tally runs past 200 sets, Harrod estimates, with an equally staggering number of puppets. Andy Gent introduces himself as head of puppets. Working with Anderson on this film means overseeing design, scale, materials, and the performance of every character. Before reading the script, Anderson asked him to listen to a clip of Drummers First, footage that left him fired up well before the page. Reading the script afterward, the pieces start assembling themselves in his head. Anderson follows with reference photos of real dogs he liked, dirty, disheveled, downbeat animals that had clearly lived rough. From there, back and forth refinement, how skeletal, how downtrodden, pushes the design toward its final look. A puppet's scale has to serve performance and appearance at once, and it must interact convincingly with the environment. A giant set could swallow an entire football field if the puppets inside it are large, while a smaller puppet lets the crew shoot a mountain vista without building at full size. Anderson, Gent observes, loves the charm that miniatures bring on their own. A muted exclamation greets one such tiny figure on screen. Embracing that scale means coaxing performance out of genuinely small things. Rex snaps that the wrong dog has died. Gent describes a working large scale, used most often for its rich finish detail and expressiveness in close-up. An occasional overscale version handles extreme close shots where materials would otherwise betray themselves. A half-scale serves bigger sets and crowd shots, the Municipal Dome, for instance, where physical puppets fill an audience without leaning on digital duplication. Below that sit the smalls and extra smalls, built for an ocean crossed by barges or for tiny figures far in the background, some static and some articulated in wire and silicone, letting animators coax a bit of life from them at a distance. Costume draws Anderson's eye no less than any face does, Gent observes. He wants the physical cloth in hand before deciding anything. Scent swatches earn a quick verdict, a favorite, a rejection, and a costume asked about on screen earns only a shrug and a denial that it was ever new. Testing combinations against a character continues until the fit reaches an exacting level of detail. Only then does a puppet start its real journey, dressed, finished, and talking back. Puppet Hospital exists to keep the fleet running. Wire snaps, seams come loose, and small repairs pull a puppet back for a bit of surgery before it returns to work. Care extends to costumes too, which take a beating equivalent to a giant handling the same outfit all day, every day. Bomb-proof construction only goes so far. Wash days and repair days return puppets to service. Studying graphics and illustration at Kingston years earlier drew Gent toward puppetry, bunraku especially, the Japanese theater tradition where the puppeteer stays visible beside the puppet. That whole world of Japanese art and theater falls into his personal reference library. The kabuki sequence puts that lineage on screen directly. A warlord splits in two, a black-suited performer hidden behind him, and when the character's head comes off, it floats free while the hidden actor stays visible underneath. Coming back to that tradition through puppetry brings Gent real pleasure, he says. Tristan Oliver introduces himself, director of photography on Isle of Dogs. His history with Anderson runs back to Fantastic Mr. Fox, where he held the same role, and word of this project reached him straight from the source, a phone call, an offer, and a yes. Anderson wanted something visually distinct this time, and the two studied a wide range of Japanese features from the 50s and 60s. Comedies of manners, monster movies, ninja films, samurai epics, anything that helped set a mood. Oliver's takeaway from Fox holds here too. A pile of reference material from Anderson isn't a blueprint for how the film should look, only a way to get inside what he's been absorbing. Fox worked within a strict palette, rarely straying from yellow, orange, and red. This film runs broader, crisper, brighter, a different look with a different vibe entirely, and an original script besides. Nothing here owes homage to prior material, and it yields only to what Oliver terms Wes's thing. A single stage holds countless sets, and Oliver's job is to make the whole film read as if one hand built and lit every frame. He personally lights roughly 13 or 14 sets, delegating 2 or 3 more to assistants who match his style rather than pursue their own. Talented though they are, their instincts still answer to the film's overall design. He labels it top-down management of style, plainly. Physics poses the film's central challenge, Oliver says, chiefly around depth of field. A live-action human head at 6 feet lets a lens hold focus from there to infinity with ease, since the subject sits comparatively far from the camera. A puppet head the size of a thumb offers no such room. Getting both nose and ear sharp counts for luck. Yet Anderson insists that the puppet stay in focus alongside the figure standing behind it too. The workaround, breaking a single shot into focused sections and compositing them back together. Wide lenses, rarely longer than 28mm, run through nearly the entire film, since a wide angle makes that depth of field far easier to hold. The sake bar set delights Oliver. Long, dim, and convincingly authentic, it is a piece of interior architecture lit and shot in a fairly conventional way. Size alone constrains it. The room runs so tight that Oliver, no large man himself, can't fully expand his chest inside without his back and sternum brushing the walls. Working the camera through that space, small though the camera itself is, feels like maneuvering a van through a house. Fine when still, it becomes difficult the instant it tracks or pans. Trash Island carries a deliberately uniform look, flat, shadowless, heavily overcast, per Anderson's preference, and that texture comes from set dressing rather than lighting choices. Megasaki, by contrast, holds jewel-like interiors that Oliver clearly enjoys. Compact, coherent rooms, styled like little lacquer boxes, Tracy's bedroom among them, even the hospital interiors sharing the same studied palette and surfaces, lovely spaces to light and inhabit. Facing a stop-frame feature this scale, Anderson goes in aware of how strange parts of it will be. Finding solutions from a purist stop-frame stance proves genuinely hard, as the medium folded into post-production technology long ago. At its core, the process stays physical, people-moving puppets to produce intricate, beautiful results, but post techniques now support that core constantly. Crews rarely build organic elements like smoke, fog, or running water in camera anymore. Anderson, though, insists on exactly that here, leaving the crew to invent vast in-camera seascapes, a genuinely difficult task, but one Oliver admits he admires for its purity. The crew stays reactive by design, existing to serve a single vision rather than several. Everything that reaches the screen, Oliver observes plainly, comes out of Anderson's head alone. Downtime on this set means juggling, someone notes, or playing a quiet game of chess. Juggling draws a half-disbelieving repeat from F. Murray Abraham, and the answer comes back plain. Every one of them does it. Badass, comes the verdict. Good hands explain it, the reply goes, and a shrug seals the point. Jeremy Dawson pitches the next stop as a cool one. The film's opening, a Shinto temple crowded with cats. The Kobayashi dynasty, he explains, loves cats above everything, and that devotion breeds the family's hatred for dogs. Deeper into the set, a back room holds the spot where a character retells the legend seated in the film's prologue. Crews built this, one of production's most elaborate sets, and it turns into the very first image the audience sees. Amazing, someone offers. Fabulous, comes the second opinion. Next door sits a sharp contrast, a bright, high-tech science lab. Dawson brings Tucker and Murray in to see it, walking the length of a dolly track laid for a single unbroken shot. Down that one continuous move, the sequence reveals two good scientists, the professor and Yoko, working out, with their whole team, that nothing is wrong with the dogs at all, only a curable illness. A small celebratory toast closes the scene once the discovery lands, and thanks are passed around before the group moves on to the kabuki set. Elsewhere, cotton takes the shape of fire. A hand reshapes every frame until a fireball forms and curls back on itself. Color arrives through gels, with loose lights tucked behind the cloud to punch in hot spots. Steel wool is folded into the cotton to hold the darker, burning edges of the smoke. Only 147 frames make up the shot, yet the pace crawls. The dogs still have to explode before the clouds thin, and only then does the whole sequence speed up, freeing the characters to move without trailing smoke behind them. Dawson maps the kabuki play onto the film's own myth. The boy samurai of legend, told at the story's opening, returns here in a school play reenactment, tangled into the plot around it. The boy samurai borrows his shape from Atari, the film's central character. A great story, Abraham calls it, before turning to memory, a real kabuki actor he once watched and later met, a wonderful man by his account. Passion overtakes the performer mid-performance, the same rolling cadence Abraham compares to Marlowe's verse, which he has performed himself and calls thrilling. Once the actor reaches that pitch, the crowd rises with him, chanting his name, Koshiro, again and again, feeding him energy that builds him higher still. So thrilling, Abraham says, that the moment fixed itself in him, the kind of theater he has wanted to make ever since. Every exterior beyond a window now needs rearranging, Dawson recounts, into new configurations for a city-wide skyline. Megasaki once carried a classic skyscape built from roughly 150 buildings, its volcano standing in for the city's own Mount Fuji and hanging in the background of nearly every shot. Ancient Megasaki sits beside a red municipal dome, Mayor Kobayashi's seat of power, hosting much of the film's action. Multiple angles let the camera climb the structure or drop inside. One pass at dog height, another at human height, each reframing Kobayashi's own point of view. Dawson waves the group over before shooting starts on Atari, a robot dog frozen mid-battle beside two full-scale dog puppets. Size jumps out immediately. The full-scale figures dwarf the ones behind them, built at what the crew calls medium scale, and camera placement over the shoulder lets the two scales cheat convincingly together on screen. The climax turns on one red button. Evil henchmen push the mayor toward annihilating the dogs, and Kobayashi's repentance breaks out instead, mid-fight. Above the set, a monitor shows the crew's own version of a Looney Tunes brawl, a rolling cloud of smoke with arms and legs poking through it. Dawson explains how Wes Anderson directs the animators. A rough rehearsal comes first, cruder and closer to blocking, before notes travel back and forth until the real take is locked. A mechanical slide draws gasps from the group. Unbelievable, someone calls it. A line about a bite finding its mark punctuates the demo, timed with the puppet's snap. That's the shot he's doing, Dawson confirms. A piece hand-built at smaller scale by an outside artist, its staging modeled on the look of Citizen Kane. The films he has worked on, this account continues, swing from cartoony extremes to full naturalism, and Wes leans hard into the more abstract end of that range, treating the film like a work of art free to bend however a given moment needs. Poetic, he calls it. He says he loves that freedom. His own process starts with the animatic. He sits with it, hunts for its timing, and asks what actually needs to land in that moment of the film. Very early on, back on a Fox production, this practice of live-action reference videos took hold. LAVs, filmed to pull a performance out of pure imagination. He started filming himself and noticed his own animation sharpen almost immediately. Small things, a tilt of the head, carry information no one could invent from scratch. Better to have the reference than guess at it. Wes does the same, sometimes staring straight down the lens without moving at all. A lav that looks like nothing moves at all, yet it gives the animator the confidence to keep a moment subtle rather than overplaying it. A stop-motion puppet left still that long risks looking dead. Life has to come from somewhere else. Fur solves part of that problem. A gentle stir keeps a character breathing without a single overt gesture. Drifting works the same trick further, mounting the puppet on a small rig with a winder that lets it rise and fall in barely perceptible increments. A rise in the body pairs with a slight dip of the head to keep the motion honest and alive. One sequence tests every part of that method at once. Chief, mid-monologue about his own habit of biting, spills most of his life story, while the pack trades favorite foods around him. It is barely a minute of screen time, and it took a month to animate. Grass hemmed the puppet in and had to come out for access, then go back in for a second pass covering the listening dogs. 2 full passes just to keep everyone alive within the frame, each one carrying the same demand for restraint that defines the whole approach. Let the audience believe a small plastic face is thinking and feeling without doing very much to prove it. That restraint traces back to the storyboard and the animatic, reviewed over and over for its own subtlety. For this particular line, Wes again filmed himself performing it, and small, unplanned beats in that reference carry over intact. Stepping back from the finished shot still surprises him. It works somehow, even though by any reasonable account it shouldn't. A new location appears, the bamboo forest, built entirely for one 3-second shot. None of the bamboo is real. Every stalk is a fabrication made to read like the genuine thing on camera. Dawson introduces Atari properly, inviting a hold of the puppet like a newborn. Weight gives away the steel armature hidden inside, though the clothing is fully tailored, down to real working zippers. Ball-bearing joints make the whole figure animatable, and the face itself detaches, pulled free to reveal the mechanism underneath. Andy Gent picks up the build from there. A hero face has to exist clean, with nothing on it. Cinematographer Tim gets an unmarked plate to work from. A second version carries a plug that phonetic shapes can slot into, meaning the same expression often exists twice, with and without that plug. Every plug fits every face, and every face fits every puppet body. The same process repeats down to the half-scale versions. Only certain characters earn the more elaborate, semi-translucent skin. Others don't need it. Paint testing runs frame by frame, checking that expressions sit together without visibly colliding. First at a rough molding stage, then again at a refined second stage once a cast comes out and technicians trim it down. Aang paints and builds up the final surface. Painters check colors against the cast part, add eyebrows last, and test them for anything too extreme. Only then does a finished face reach the studio floor, the last step for one character out of hundreds. Dawson turns to the crowd shots. Puppets are packed shoulder to shoulder, most in the back built minimal and barely posable, while the ones up front carry full animation rigs. Still, the camera reads the whole mass convincingly, remarkable, by his own account, and a density of puppets he doubts most people have ever seen in one shot. Empty spaces in the frame still wait for extras that haven't been put in yet. On a monitor nearby, the actual photographed frame reveals just how rich the image gets once lens and light align. Long exposures make that possible, Dawson points out. Miniature work requires deep focus, and because nothing in frame moves, the camera can sit open far longer than usual. The image always looks richer here on the monitor than it will look once it's cut into the finished set. Frej Bengtsson compares the two subjects he animates. Humans, in his experience, come more easily than dogs. A quadruped's gait never stops being a puzzle. 4 legs demand constant recalculation that 2 legs don't. Being human himself gives him an intuitive read on human movement that a dog's body withholds by default. For one particular kneel, Wes wanted a specific piece of physical action and acted it out himself on camera, giving the animation team a direct reference to build from. The title sequence brings in a troupe of boy taiko drummers. Timed to a real recorded track rather than an invented rhythm, meaning the team had to research actual drumming technique before a single frame moved. Andy Gent offers a look at the puppet built to the production's largest scale, inviting a direct comparison with its own reflection. Its eyes draw particular attention. One glass, made to catch light exactly the way a real eye would. Every part of the face moves. Eyebrows, expression, the set of the cheeks can all shift, drawing open admiration from the group. The tasting scene plays out next, straight from the finished film. Someone pours turpentine brandy and credits it with cooling the head. The Oracle predicts snow, and Boss receives the forecast with startled gratitude. Addressed to whom it may concern, the Oracle's manner draws a scoff of disbelief from King, dismissed outright until Boss clarifies that her gift reads television broadcasts, not the future itself. Someone inquires after Spots, the missing dog at the center of the search, and both Jupiter and the Oracle confirm the same designation for him, Dog Zero. Working with Abraham lifts the whole conversation, he says, enough by one account to bring the speaker close to tears. Wonderful, comes the reply, met with thanks on both sides as the exchange winds down. Tension breaks across the room, a fight brews. With puppets like these dogs, real experience decides whether a face reads alive. Sets and puppets can stand ready. Only the animator alone steps behind the black curtain, turning a static, lifeless scene into something carrying real life, emotion, and vitality. Lumps of metal, rubber, and silicone hold no life on their own, yet the animators wring performances out of them anyway. Inanimate objects turn animate under their hands. One artist likens the work to sculpting a performance directly, the same instinct a child uses at play. Another describes it as moving sculpture. At a very early stage in the production, discussions settle how the dogs and humans would actually move and behave. One process starts by sitting down to watch the animatic play through. A film clip cuts in with a sharp order to quit dwelling on an old wound. Timings and atmosphere, plus whatever mood Wes is chasing, set the rhythms the animation has to match. An unusually strong cast anchors the production, and the animation grows directly out of their performances, each dog's style carrying a distinct personality. On screen, a small owl faces a direct challenge to speak up and share its message. Rather than record dialogue live, the team lays down the voice track well ahead of time. A short back and forth of confusion, one question chasing another, breaks up the beat. Afterward, the team breaks each line down phonetically, matching sound to mouth movement. In one clip, a boy answers in Japanese. Separate from the dogs, the human characters run on a replacement face system. Every face comes handmade and hand-sculpted, consuming enormous amounts of skill and craft, exactly the texture one collaborator believes the director wants, and it lends the film a life other stop-frame animation often lacks. The dogs themselves stay lip-synced throughout. On screen, a flat refusal shuts down a request to ride the pagoda slide. Off-camera, crews confirm they are able to physically open the puppets' mouths for each shot. A second jab lands on screen, an accusation calling the refusal a dirty lie. Direction narrows further still, bigger eyes here, a snarl there, tuned shot by shot. Off-camera, a database of dog actions gives every animator raw material to build a performance from. How a dog walks alone can define its personality on screen. Animators rank the walk among the hardest things to nail in the craft. Working with Wes, the team develops live-action videos, nicknamed LAVs, to test ideas before committing them to puppets. Wes uses the videos to suggest a movement, a gesture, or an emotional state the characters need to carry into a performance. Animatic and Levy then combine into something like a route map, pointing each animator toward exactly where a shot needs to go. On screen, a blunt threat closes the exchange. A bite lands next. Pulling a performance purely from imagination proves difficult enough that one animator starts filming himself first for reference. The animation improves almost immediately, carrying every small subtlety straight into the puppet's movement. Casting matches each animator to a particular strength. Some carry a gift for nuance, teasing out something subtle and genuinely emotional in a scene. A flat retort cuts through one such beat, a character snapping back that the eavesdropping hasn't gone unnoticed. Others specialize in action instead, built for jumping, running, and the physical side of a shot. One densely populated sequence alone carries a heavy cast of characters. On screen, a chain of events runs its course. The dogs explode, the clouds begin to dissipate, and the whole sequence speeds up. Comedy timing ranks among the hardest skills to land in the craft. Disgust closes one beat in a blunt, two-word insult aimed at another character. Animators sometimes catch themselves laughing at their own footage mid-shot, amused by a performance taking shape under their own hands. Occasionally, no one can quite explain how a movement travels from imagination through an animator's hands into the finished film. Every puppet carries dozens of options and choices, and each stage carries its own process. Figuring out what suits the world of the film takes constant testing, weighed against what fits the story, what matches voices already recorded, and how much play a design allows. Andy Gent runs everything connected to puppets on the production. Inside a clip from the film, a small plea for a master cuts through the room. One puppet's line about wanting to find his master. Gent describes the workshop's job, delivering and building every puppet on the show, close to 900 characters in total, with several thousand faces sculpted, molded, and painted, everyone shaped by hand. No puppet here comes off a machine. Partway through the count, Gent stumbles over his own numbers and laughs at himself, admitting that the scale still confuses him. Sculpting proceeds straight from character design, and Gent's team shapes each figure first in plasticine. The scale of it outstrips anything Gent has tackled before. 12 sculptors work on a single animated film, a count he calls almost unheard of. Once a plasticine sculpt wins approval, the workshop pulls a mold from it. The mold catches every carved detail. 4 dog scales and 5 human scales run through the build, and 200 characters carry face replacements for extra range. Armature building comes next in the process. Corbin, who oversees this stage, describes the armature, the actual moving mechanism buried inside every puppet. Some animators want loose, fluid tension in the joints, others push for something much harder to move. Preference decides the setting, not a fixed rule. Animator by animator, the rig changes. Silicone goes on over the armature next, cast right on top to build the puppet's skin. Beastjack's team paints the skin directly inside the mold, sets the armature into place, and pours the silicone around it. The material stays translucent and soft to the touch, giving animators a wide range of movement most rigid puppets never get. Once the silicone sits in place, painters add the small imperfections, bruises, flecks, shrapnel scars that read on screen exactly the way the camera catches them. Keeley spends her days on the Tracy freckles alone, copying each pattern by eye with a small brush, tracking up to 297 freckles on a single face. Across the job, her brush has covered more than 22,000 freckles on that one character. An off-camera question breaks in. Why go to such lengths over freckles nobody will count? No answer comes back before Gent moves to hair, punched in strand by strand once the paint on each face has dried. Williams takes a needle to each individual hair, planting it by hand across the scalp. Replacement faces and replacement wigs double the burden since every version has to match exactly face to face and head to head. Dogs receive the same treatment, Gent notes, with Woods' team supplying the fur. Genuine fibers, mohair and alpaca sheared straight off live animals, supply the material here. Millions of individual hairs, by Woods' estimate, have gone into the dogs alone. Wes Anderson's own interest in costume pushes the wardrobe team toward an unusual collection of fabrics. Stop-motion forces cloth to freeze mid-pose for every frame, then move again once the camera stops rolling. Control matters more than in live costume work. Thin-rolled sheet lead and aluminum wire go into the seams to give the fabric real weight. In effect, another small puppet built right into the clothing. Once that's finished, the costume is nearly ready to go onto a set. Gent calls it simple. A beat later, he admits out loud that even he needed a second to follow his own explanation. Several stages run simultaneously across the studio, and fitting every sequence into that schedule takes constant cleverness on Gent's part. Only one puppet carries Bill Murray's likeness, and the film's own footage makes the point. A clip shows the character owning up to being the mascot for an unbeaten high school baseball team. One puppet, one shot. The same holds for Scarlett Johansson's puppet. A curt clip line brushing off a personal question shows just how singular that one figure is. Because only one puppet exists per star, only one version can shoot at any given time, even while the production pushes to shoot 12 sets at once, across 5 different scales. Corbin still marvels at how each puppet the workshop builds ends up a fully realized, moving character on screen. The transformation catches her breath every time she reflects, no matter how many she's seen. What the animators managed to do leaves her endlessly surprised, and the whole process strikes her as nothing short of magical. A megaphone crackles across the opening shot in Japanese, and the drumming under the sequence cuts out. 2 worlds anchor the story. Megasaki stands 20 years in the future, a city ruled by its mayor's cat-loving Kobayashi dynasty. That dynasty pushes through a campaign to drive every dog out of the city, and exile leaves them on a heap called Trash Island. Scrap iron, paper, and refuse nobody can fully name pile up to form the island itself. Futurism defines Megasaki's look, though the vision tilts backward as much as forward. It reads like a future imagined from the vantage point of the 1960s, neon crowds every frame. Color, chaos, and noise stack on top of each other until the whole city seems to hum with too much at once, a density the filmmakers clearly wanted, not avoided. Delight comes from something smaller inside Megasaki, a scatter of jewel-like interiors tucked between the chaos. A member of the production design team frames these beautifully crafted rooms as the deepest homage to Japanese style in the whole film. Every surface inside obeys one coherent, studied logic. No one improvises anything there. An official decree then turns Trash Island into a formal exile colony, closing the film's own opening narration. Trash Island's design calls for a jumble of different cast-offs piled together. Wes Anderson's first instinct pushes for something thoroughly sorted across the whole island. Sorting that mess turns into the first real decision, and the team splits the island so that each stretch holds only one category of junk. Step into a new stretch, and the trash underfoot changes with it. Bright white paper covers one stretch, rusted-out cars pile up in another, and a wall of dead black television screens fills out a third. Contrast drives the cut. The film keeps jumping between this riot of color and a landscape stripped bare. Anderson's team designed every scrap of junk on the island, piece by piece. Moving between these different trash-built worlds turns out to be the fun part, with each one shaped by its own category of junk. Old and new sit side by side in this stretch of the documentary, Trash Island carrying the weight of the past while Megasaki carries everything still ahead. One shot alone captures the skyline. 150 buildings went up for that single shot, each one lit on its own. Its train rolls through too, appearing across just 2 shots, gone again almost the instant it arrives. A question about what this place even is greets a first look at the island on screen. Barry Jones leads the crew. His team builds sets organically, hunting for odd materials along the way rather than following a fixed plan. Bits of plastic, scraps of metal, and junk anyone might find in a backyard all end up being woven into the island's surface. Invention runs in 2 directions here. The island invents its own place and in its own way, its own time too. Wes Anderson grants he couldn't have pictured any of it in advance. Vision, sound, music, language, and culture all stack together until the effect compounds far past what any single element could manage alone. Nothing gives it away beforehand. Watching it come together feels like opening a present with no idea what's inside. A production designer describes a vast stage crowded with countless sets, built because the movie sends nearly every sequence to a different location. More than 240 sets fill the film, some lasting only 3 or 4 seconds on screen. Interior sets average 6 to 8 meters. The larger ones stretch further still, and the biggest, by the designer's estimate, reaches around 16 meters. Dawson describes an early idea and artwork phase anchored by 2 standout concept artists. Black Paper carries all of Turlough's concept work, including much of the Trash Island landscape art. Victor sketches the machinery, drones, robot dog. Finished artwork moves into a physical maquette phase, and the crew builds each maquette at the exact scale the eventual set will occupy on stage. At this stage, Foam Core stands in for the entire set. Draft approval sends crews to raise the actual set on the stage. 2 different construction paths shape the sets. Traditional carpentry and paint cover one path, straightforward and expected. Because trash forms so much of the world, the set dressing crew, led by Barry Jones, often assembles sets organically instead. Nothing on this show can look too polished or slick. Physical elements dominate over computer generation. The crew shoots actual pieces and combines them rather than building elements on a screen. Shooting tangible material means matching it convincingly. Solutions have to come from a die-hard stop-frame point of view, and that constraint alone can make certain shots very difficult to pull off. Dawson points out that none of it registers on screen. The techniques behind it stem from genuine inventiveness, crews constantly asking how to produce a certain feeling. This film in particular carries a meticulous attention to detail in constructing its world. Specific props carry the detail further. A rancid apple core, 2 worm-eaten banana peels, a moldy rice cake, a dried-up pickle, a tin of sardine bones, each one built for Trash Island set dressing. Japanese newspapers turn up too, produced by the graphics department, some backed with foil, letting the open air move them. Across the industry, organic effects like smoke, fog, running water, and rain rarely happen in camera anymore. Wes stays firmly committed to doing them that way regardless. For most of this film's raw elements, the crew pushes to build things practically wherever possible. Vast seascapes present one of the hardest practical challenges of all. Kling Film somehow produces 3 separate maelstroms and 3 whirlpools, all entirely in camera. Fire and a waterfall round out the same practical toolkit. An initial hope for how a shot might turn out rarely matches the result. Reality outdoes the expectation nearly every time, arriving about 10 times better than imagined.